Okay, well, thank you very much, Jose, and thanks to you and to Jennifer and Mario for the invitation to give this talk. So, yeah, can we do something with this screen here, spotlighted or whatever one calls it?
Okay, I guess you have to able to, yes, to
There you
share
go.
the.
I put spotlight for everyone.
Thank you.
Does
Right.
everyone see it now?
Thank you.
That's it. Great, great. Looks good. All right. So, yeah, so prime quasi-alternating links are atoroidal. So this is joint work with Steve Boyer and Ying Hu. And by the way, let me first say that the title actually, it's not a very accurate description of the talk. Really, I mean, I will mention this result that's in the title, but the talk is really going to be an introduction to Steve's talk, which is the next talk. So I'll be giving some general background to that, and Steve will give more details. So yeah, so lurking in the background to all this stuff is the L-space conjecture. So let me remind people or tell people about this. So this says the following. It says that if you have a prime closed connected orientable three manifold M, then the following three conditions are equivalent. The first is that M is not an L space in the sense of Heegard-Floer homology. And we'll abbreviate that just to saying that M is NLS. The second condition is that the fundamental group is left orderable, and we'll abbreviate that to saying that M is LO. And the third is that M has a co-orientable taut foliation, and I'll abbreviate that to just M is CTF. And I'll say a little bit more about these three conditions in a minute. Let me first say though that throughout the talk, I'll always assume that my three manifolds they're always going to be connected and orientable, and I'll always assume they're prime as well. So if I don't say that, it's implicit. Okay, so that's the L-space conjecture. So let me just say something about these three conditions. Most of you know it, but let me just say it anyway. So NLS, all right, so NLS. So a manifold is NLS if either it has infinite first homology, or it has finite first homology, in which case it's a rational homology sphere. And in that case, one asks that associated with M, there's the hat Heegard-Floer homology of M with Z2 coefficients. So that's just a finite dimensional vector space over Z2. And one wants the dimension of this to be strictly greater than the order of the first homology of M, which will be a finite abelian group. And well, as most of you know, I mean, there's always an inequality. I mean, there's always an inequality here with the possibility of equality. And when you have equality, then that's when you're called an L space. So you're not an L space if it's a strict strict inequality there. That's NLS. What about LO? Well, LO is, remember, it says that the group, so the group pi1m is left orderable. So that says that there's a total order on pi1 of m, and we'll assume that pi1 of m is not trivial, so m is not the Ries sphere, which is in this order is supposed to be invariant under left multiplication. That's the left part of the definition. So G less than H implies FG less than FH. So that's left orderable. In practice, actually, it's frequently more convenient to use a sort of dynamical characterization of this, which is that this is equivalent to saying that there's a faithful representation from pi1 of m into the group of orientation preserving homeomorphisms of the real line. In fact, this equivalence is true for all countable groups. for prime three-manifold groups, there's actually a much better equivalence, that namely that there exists a non-trivial representation in homeopath cells. And this equivalence is due to Boyer, Rolston, and Wiest. Okay, so that's LO. And then finally, CTF. Well, Rachel talked about that yesterday. Let me just remind you that there's a codimension 1 foliation F on our three-manifold M, and everything's orientable. The manifold's oriented. Let's say the leaves are oriented, and not only that, but you have a consistent sort of co-orientation to the leaves. That's the co-orientable. And taut it's just that there should be a loop in M that meets every leaf transversely. If you don't have that, then every three-manifold has a foliation, so it's not so interesting. Okay, so those are the three properties in the L space conjecture. All right, so and I'm going to be talking about those three properties in the context of toroidal three manifolds. So let me just make some remarks about these three definitions. So the first remark is that if H1 of M is infinite, then M has all three properties. And so again, the interesting case is when M is a rational homology sphere. It's also known that CTF implies NLS. So this was proved by Osvath and Szabo under a certain smoothness assumption on the foliation, and that assumption was shown to be unnecessary by Kazez and Roberts, and independently by Jonathan Bowden. So, and then finally, let me remind you that the geometrization conjecture says that, you know, a manifold of the type I was talking about, it's either Seifert fibered, or it contains an incompressible torus, or it's hyperbolic. And so we're going to focus on the case when you're toroidal. And so, as I say, we obviously assume that you're a rational homology sphere. So I'm going to mention some results that we prove in this context, including the one in the title, and just say a little bit about the proofs. Steve will give many more details. Well, so if you do have a rational homology sphere with an incompressible torus, that incompressible torus is going to split the M into two pieces, and they will be rational homology solid tori. Okay, and so sort of turning this around a little bit, you can think of getting M by taking two rational homology solid tori, X1 and X2, and gluing them together by some homeomorphism between their boundaries. Okay, and you'd like to know when such a manifold has properties NLS, or when it's LO, when it's CTF. Okay, so there's a general sort of philosophy, as it were, for discussing this sort of question. Namely, so here, so X is going to be a rational homology solid torus. And remember, we wanted our torus T to be incompressible, so we're going to disallow S1 cross D2, not a solid torus. And remember, X is irreducible. It's prime, you know, by hypothesis. Well, the point is, let me just say in very vague generality that there's a notion, and Steve will give more details, there's a notion of a slope on the boundary of X. So the boundary of X is just a torus, right? And there's a notion of a slope being star detected, where star is any one of those three properties, NLS, LO, or CTF. Okay, there's a notion which has the following property, for which, if we denote by D star X the set of star detected slopes, on the boundary, we get a gluing theorem. So we get, so this is the star gluing theorem. So it addresses the situation I've been talking about. So M is the union of two rational homology solid tori along their common boundary. So this torus T is boundary X1, boundary X2. And then we want to know when M has one of these properties. Well, a sufficient condition is that if there's a slope on T that is star detected in both X1 and X2. Okay, so. Okay, so that's the gluing thing. Now, like I said, there is a notion of, I mean, the details are different for obviously for the three sort of categories here, but let me just say for the NLS case, this is due to Hanselman, Rasmussen, and Watson. And in the LO case, this is due to Boyer and Clay. And let me say that, by the way, I mean, it's important in this gluing theory, it's important that you get the maximal, you want to maximize this set, right? So really, one would like this to be an equivalence. So, I mean, conjecturally, in fact, this is an if and only if. And this is known to be true in the NLS case by Hanselman, Rasmussen, and Watson. So for example, it's always true that if you do a Dane filling along a slope on X along a slope, if you get a manifold with one of these properties, then in fact that slope is star detected. On the other hand, if you took that as your definition, you would not get an if and only if here. So you have to look at a more general class of slopes. So the definition has to be different. It's not that definition. And in fact, let me just just make a sort of an additional remark here that you know, when you have a rational homology solid torus, there's always a rational longitude. There's this unique slope that's homologically rationally trivial in X, and this is always star detected, because if you do the Dane filling, you certainly get something with that. You get something with infinite H1. But on the other hand, an important example that comes up in many of the applications is when X is just a complement of a naught in S3, and there, if you look at the meridian, that's a slope. Obviously, if you do Dane filling along the meridian, you get a manifold that doesn't have any of these three properties. On the other hand, it should be star detected. So in fact, mu is it is star detected for star equals NLS and LO, and for CTF, if at the moment we need to know that K is 5, but anyway. Anyway, that's okay. But there is this notion of detection, and it implies that the toroidal manifold obtained by gluing together two things. If there's a slope on T that is detected on both X1 and X2, then you'll have the property. So let me just give, and again, Steve is going to say more about this. Let me just give some of the applications. So one application would be to integral homology spheres. So again, I'm thinking about prime integral homology spheres. And in general, let me remind you, there's a conjecture of Osvath and Szabo that if M is a ZHS, then the only such prime manifolds that are L spaces are just the ones with finite fundamental group. So then M is an L space, if and only if M is S3, or the Poincare homology sphere. So in particular, if M is toroidal, if it contains an universal torus, then it shouldn't be an L space. And this is true. This is a theorem of Eftehari, also proved by Hansel and Rasmussen and Watson. And it says that indeed a toroidal integral homology sphere is NLS. Okay. So by the L space conjecture, one expects it to be LO and CTF. And so that's the first theorem that we proved. So let me just mention that. So this is, as I said, joint with Steve Boyer and Ying Hu. So suppose M is a toroidal integral homology sphere. Then indeed M is LO, funnel group is affordable. For CTF, again, we need this fibered condition. So, so again, if M is X1 union T X2 as before, you know, blah blah blah, then an X2 is fibered. One of them is fibered, then in fact, M is also CTF. Okay, so that's one situation where, yeah, we get the sort of expected answer as to these properties. Another situation where incompressible tori arise is when you take branch covers of satellite nodes. So let me again briefly talk about satellite nodes. And again, I know Jessica talked about these yesterday, but so suppose if you've got a non-trivial knot K and S3, then according to the sort of geometric type of its exterior, you have these three classes of knots. The exterior is either Seifert fibered, in which case you're a torus knot, or it's toroidal, it contains an essential torus, in which case you're a satellite knot, or it's hyperbolic, in which case you're hyperbolic. All right, so so again, if you've got this torus in the knot exterior, that torus will bound a solid torus in S3. So of course the picture is, as you all know, you have this concept of a satellite knot. You have a pattern P in a solid torus V, and then you choose a non-trivial knot K0, which when I draw it, it's always the trefoil. It's the only one I can draw. And you just choose a homeomorphism from this abstract solid torus to a regular neighborhood of K0, and then you just embed this in S3 in that way, and you look at the image of this pattern P. And that's the satellite of K0. I guess to be really precise, you should probably choose this to preserve some framing. And then K0 is called a companion. And of course, for non-triviality, you want the intersection of P with a meridian disk to be at least 1. And if it is 1, you don't want it just to be a core, but we want our satellite knots to be prime. And so actually, we want these patterns always to have the property that the intersection with any meridian disk of the solid torus is at least 2 points. Okay. So that's just a quick reminder of a satellite knot and the companion. Now, for any knot, of course, you can always look at the n-fold cyclic branch cover of K. And several people have looked at these for various knots in the context of the three properties in the L space conjecture. And in particular, Ty Lidman and I looked at this quite a while ago, and after some false starts, it became clear that the following conjecture was reasonable, that if you have a satellite knot, let's say a prime satellite knot, then in fact all the n-fold cyclic branch covers for angular 2, they should have all these three properties. So it should be, let's say it's LO and CTF. And because it's CTF, it therefore would be NLS. So that's what one would expect. So this is the context of the second theorem that I want to state. Again, this is joint work with Steve and Ying. Again, same hypothesis. Then the conclusion is that for all n greater than 2, at least sigma nk, it is NLS and LO. And again, because the technology for CTF is lagging a little bit behind the others because of this, well, we need this vibration condition. So it's this is true in generality, and it's CTF if the companion is fiber. So so that's a result. I guess we almost get this conjecture, but perhaps not quite. It remains open in this for the CTF part in this case here. Let me just very briefly say something about the proof. You see, if we have a satellite knot, sigma 3 S3K, remember we have this solid torus V, and then we have this pattern P in there, and then we're just sticking on the exterior of the knot K0 onto V, and I guess we're sticking the empty set onto P, and so X is just the exterior of the companion K0. And so when you take the n-fold cyclic branch cover, you get a corresponding decomposition of that as the n-fold cyclic branch cover of the solid torus branched over P, union, well, a bunch of copies of the appropriate cyclic covers of X. So let me just write down the sort of formula. You get so here, I mean, well, okay. So I mean, if you take W to be the winding number of P in the solid torus V, and D to be the GCD of W and N, then when you take this cyclic branch cover here, the number of boundary components is D. And then onto that you stick, so now M is N over D. And so this is going to be, these are copies of, let's call it XM, which is the M-fold cyclic cover of X. So you get this decomposition, and so you've got all these incompressible tori, namely all these D incompressible tori, and there's an extension of the gluing theorem to that situation where you have several tori, and you need to know that there's a slope that's going to be star detected. You see on both sides. Well, it turns out that what you need to show is that if mu is a meridian in boundary X, the meridian of K0, then this gives you a slope mu M, I guess, in the boundary of the M-fold cyclic cover. And it turns out that this guy is star detected. And again, and for a CTF, if K0 is 5. So again, I just wanted to mention that because that kind of points up the importance of having slopes that are detected that that don't come from Dane fillings. Anyway, then, like I said, then an extension of the star gluing theorem gives us that this manifold has property star in there. Okay. Sorry, so that's a quick thingy there. Okay, so let's getting back to the conjecture that for a prime satellite knot, all the cyclic branch covers should be LO and CDF. So remember, a satellite knot, that's one whose exterior contains an essential torus. So that should extend to links as well, actually. So this conjecture with Ty Lidman, it should extend. It should extend to length. So we can't prove that, but we can prove at least a very special case, which at least has the corollary, the result in the title. So this is the third and last theorem. Well, the third theorem I want to mention that comes out of our kind of techniques here is that if L is a prime link, and again, and so the analog of satellite would be, we just want the exterior to be toroidal. Well, then one expects all the cyclic branch covers to be, to have these three properties. But in fact, at least we know that the two focal branch cover, at least we know that's NLX. Okay. We actually we know some more, but let's just stick to that. So this leads to, well, finally, this leads to the topic in the title of the talk. So let me remind you that this classical theorem of Monasco, proved before many of you were born, I have no doubt. It says that if you have a prime non-split alternating link, then well, it can't be a satellite. It can't be it can't be toroidal. Its exterior can't be toroidal. So I mean, in fact, more specifically, it's either a 2Q torus link or it's hyperbolic. So that was a great theorem, and of course, it at the time, which was around about the time when Thurston was introducing hyperbolic structures, it gave rise to many, many examples of hyperbolic things. Well, when Hegardt for homology came along, Osnath and Szabo showed that the double branch cover of such a link, a prime non-split ortho link, is always an L space. And then they noticed that the proof actually works for a more general class of links, which they called quasi-alternating. So Osnath Szabo defined this notion of quasi-alternating. And yeah, they proved that double branch cover of such a thing was or else. It was the first. Well, anyway, yeah, I mean, they first did this for alternating links, and like I said, they noticed that the proof works in this more general context. So one has the following sort of implications. If L is non-split alternating, so quasi-alternating is a generalization of that. So then you're certainly quasi-alternating. And if you're quasi-alternating, then Manolescu and Osvath showed that the Z2 Kavanagh homology of L is the reduced Kavanagh homology is supported on a single diagonal. So your Z2 Kavanagh thin, this was Manolescu and Osvath. And on the other hand, Osvath and Szabo showed that if you're Z2 Kavanagh thin, then your double branch cover is an L space. Okay. So what was the theorem in the, oops, Okay, the theorem in the title, let me just get to that, and we'll leave it at that, I guess. So this is the theorem in the title, I guess this is theorem 4. So it says that a prime Z2 Ivanov thin, e.g., well, e.g., what was alternating thing is either a 2Q torus link or it's hyperbolic. So Monasco's theorem extends to this more general class, quasi-alternating. In fact, more generally, Z2. And particularly, we get a new proof of Monasco's theorem, which has the advantage of you can replace beautiful elementary topological arguments with pseudo-holomorphic curve arguments. And anyway, okay. So let me just quickly, sorry, I guess I'm pretty much out of time, but let me just quickly give the proof of this here that you see, so let's assume that L is Z2 Kavanagh thin. And let's suppose it's not hyperbolic, okay? We've got to show it's a torus now. Well, the main point is that you see, if you're Kavanagh thin, the double branch cover is an L space. But we show that if you have a toroidal link, then the double branch cover is never an L space. And so that was theorem 3. So if you take the Osvat-Szabo theorem together with theorem 3, the exterior can't be toroidal, and we're assuming it's not hyperbolic, so it must be a Seifert fiber space. And then it's an old result of Burda and Murasugi. They classify the links whose complements are Seifert fiber. They all turn out to be positive braids if you orient the components appropriately. Well, if you're braid positive, in particular, you're strongly quasi-positive. And if the double branch covers an L space, Michel Boileau and Steve and I proved quite a while ago that implies that the signature of L is maximal. The form is sort of definite. Well, now, if you have a positive braid link with definite, where the signature is maximal, that was studied by Bader. And he proved that the only such links come from plumbing positive Hopf bands according to these famous ADE, Dinkin diagrams. And they turn out to be precisely the 2Q torus knots. That's the ones we want, and a few others. The 3-4, the 3-5 torus knot, and a few pretzel knots. This family and this one. But luckily, those remaining ones, they were shown not to be Kavanagh thin by Kavanagh and Mannion respectively. And so we're left with just the torus knots, the torus links 2Q, which is what we wanted. Okay, so that's a brief summary of that proof. And my time is up, so I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. So let's thank you for your beautiful talk. So, does anyone has a question? Final remarks? Okay, so thank you again, Cameron, for your beautiful talk.
Thank you.